Quote, I would rather eat my own foot out of a bear trap. That's how one libertarian voter described voting for former President Trump if they had to. On Saturday, Trump pitched himself at the Libertarian Party's national convention and was nearly drowned out by the sound of raucous booing and jeers from the crowd.
There will be no more liberty for anyone in our country. Combined with us in a partnership, we're asking that of the libertarians. We must work together. Combine with us. You have to combine with us. We cannot give crooked Joe Biden 4 more years. We cannot give crooked Joe Biden 4 more years.
I have never heard him booed like that. At one point during Saturday's speech, it got so heated that punches were thrown in the audience. And it wasn't just Trump's appearance there. Delegates didn't even want to hear his name, booing at the mere mention of Donald Trump and other speeches throughout the weekend event. So why would Donald Trump go? Why would a man who prefers friendly crowds and an entourage of allies put himself through that, what you just saw? Why would anyone, frankly? According to a Trump campaign official, though, ahead of the former president's remarks, they said if you want to compete for non-traditional Republican votes, then you have to go to where the non-traditional Republicans are. You can't expect them to just show up to you. Joining us now, NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns, NBC News senior politics reporter Jonathan Allen, and the Atlantic staff writer and author of the book, Thank You for Your Servitude, Mark Leibovich. Mark is also an MSNBC contributor. Dasha, I have never heard Donald Trump booed like that at an event that he's chosen to go to.
No, that's absolutely right. Really not the typical environment, the typical crowd. But his campaign is painting this as part of his, quote, unity tour. They point to him trying to play in places like Minnesota and Virginia, him going to the Bronx, right? He's going to unexpected places, and they're saying, listen, yeah, he may get booed, but he is showing up in unfriendly territory. He is serious about trying to win these votes. Certainly, if you know former President Trump, that is not the reception he wanted or expected, but they're putting him out there.
Let's listen to some more of them.
I thought it was good. I think he pandered to libertarians and their grievances. If he can do any of the things he promised, I think that'll be a move in the right direction. We're not hopeful. He didn't do it great.
I would actually be more aligned with Kennedy than I am Trump. And I think that Trump's tone was a little threatening to us, saying that we have to vote for him, we have to nominate him.
If he promises to get libertarian congressional members and his administration, I would vote for him.
That's what he just said, though.
Big photo.
He's promising.
Santos.
I got to see action.
Photo time.
What would that action look like before he's elected?
I think there will be action before the actual voting.
In talking about Donald Trump threatening, as that one gentleman mentioned a moment ago, let's listen to Donald Trump saying that. Let's listen to what he was talking about.
The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. That's nice. Only if you want to win. Only if you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Thank you, D-Roy. Thank you. No, only do that if you want to win. If you want to lose, don't do that. Keep getting your 3% every 4 years.
John, the way he said, nominate Trump, reminded me of James Austin Johnson on SNL. It was like spot on. Let me ask you about why the Libertarians would have such a, I mean, it's a different party's convention. I don't know why another nominee for another party shows up at a rival party's convention. But Trump's policies, why are the Libertarians so hostile toward those?
Well, let me just say it's amazing to hear him mocking them for getting 3% in presidential elections as he's begging for their votes. It's very Trumpian and I guess a little amusing, but also, you would think would undercut his point. To Dasha's point, he is trying to reach out here. He ran in 2020 completely toward his base. That did not work for him. And so I think you're seeing an alteration here. But the reason libertarians would be, uncomfortable with Trump is that he has a lot of policies that his critics say are fascist and authoritarian. You saw the crackdown on protests during the George Floyd summer. You saw, his treatment of various groups that defied him, the treatment of his own allies in his cabinet, firing people. There was just a lot of stuff during his presidency that I think libertarians looked at and said, this is exactly the opposite of what we want.
It is interesting that he's showing up there. I don't know how much they like the image of him getting booed like that being out there, John, but he's also, I mean, he showed up in the Bronx the other day. That's not a friendly crowd. He did show up to blue states during the 2016 campaign. He also went to deep red places that people said were not worth going to because he was going to get those, Republicans were going to get those votes anyway. What do you make of this non-traditional strategy as he's doing it this time around?
I think it makes a lot of sense for politicians to go talk to voters and go ask them for their votes. And I think that when they go to places that are non-traditional, that are unexpected, they may not win over the room, but they may win a few votes while they're there. They may win some word of mouth. I think this is old school politics that you just you go and make your case to people. And so, I don't think there's, I don't think there's anything shocking or wrong except for that it's not the way, sort of base politics have been practiced over the
But Donald Trump hasn't been doing that for a while now. Mark, what do you think?
I think that you can look any number of which ways at the strategy behind this, why he would go there. I think there's probably a more simple strategy, which is that there's probably a scheduler or someone who brought this idea to him or the campaign that might be looking for work right now. I mean, it did look like a disaster. Having said that, I agree with Jonathan. I mean, I think certainly the South Bronx event and events like it where you can, maybe juice up your numbers on black and brown voters. And you can argue about the crowd of a thing like that or the effectiveness of a thing like that. But that got a ton of media. And it obviously sent a message that went far beyond the people who were in the crowd that day. So, yeah, I think the Libertarian event was a bit of a closed box. But I think, look, it's worth a short trip for him. I mean, it was easy to do. He got a lot of press out of it. It's obviously not a good look to be booed, but he did it. And I agree with Jonathan also. I think the 3% line was pretty funny.
In conversations with allies of President Biden, do they see this as a threat, Donald Trump doing these outside of the box events? Are they trying to counter it, or are they speaking beyond their base? Mark?
I mean, they certainly see it as a threat. I don't see any signs of them doing anything to counter it as far as where Biden is going. Although apparently there's a big rural outreach program the Biden campaign has to try to depress the numbers a little bit, or at least depress the margins a little bit for what Trump is obviously going to get in white rural areas of red states or in swing states. I do think, though, that clearly they have to pay attention, especially, again, with black and brown voters, to the margins that he seems to be cutting into. And, I mean, that's a very fertile place for Trump to be, and they're obviously committing to it a great deal. I'm sure the Biden campaign is certainly mindful of it.
What about this idea from Republicans in Congress, Dasha, that Donald Trump needs to nominate somebody as a vice president who is more of a moderate Republican, more of a traditional style Republican to convince those wavering? I think that, I mean, does that say that the Republican Party is worried about consolidating Republicans, that they understand that they're, I mean, we saw with the Libertarians not really wanting to be there. And if you're going to argue the Libertarians are more aligned with the Republicans, I think you can make an argument both ways on that. But the Republican Party itself is not fully united going into this November election because there is that stubborn strip of Republican voters who think Donald Trump is repulsive.
Right. Well, I think you could look at the data to support that sort of disunity argument, right? You can see Nikki Haley has still been winning, 15 to 20, sometimes 25% in some really critical counties,
and she's
especially
not even
in Pennsylvania.
On the ballot. That is an anti-Trump vote.
That's a message, right?
Yeah.
That's not someone saying, I hope Haley wins. That's somebody saying, I'm not voting for Trump. Now, the argument that the Trump team makes is like, these are all Democrats, right? But you have a state like Pennsylvania that's a closed primary. Only Republicans can vote in that, and you still see her succeeding there. Now, her endorsing Trump somewhat begrudgingly might make a bit of a difference.
Will it, though? Are her voters going to listen to her, or are her voters sending a message that they don't want Donald Trump?
She said exactly that. She's just because I'm doing this doesn't mean my voters are going to follow, so he needs to go out and try to get them.
Are they even her voters, or are they just anti-Trump voters who want another option in the Republican Party?
It's a great question, and you know what? I think the Biden campaign is trying hard to get those voters. They've already doubled down on some ad spending specifically targeting those Haley folks. We're seeing some kind of radical realignment happening right now among both parties, but certainly the Republican Party has an identity crisis to solve.